You're welcome to the Gavel. I'm Linda Akibi. The National Association of Resident Doctors has been on strike since August 2nd, and they're protesting the failure of the federal government to honor an agreement with the union which it entered into in March 2021 on welfare and other issues which affect members. Now, this strike has disrupted medical and non-medical activities in hospitals across the country and is coming at a time when Nigeria is dealing with the Delta variant of COVID-19. The House of Representatives intervened by holding meetings with the leadership of the association and key players in the medical sector to end the dispute. Sadly, the meetings ended in a stalemate as the union was dissatisfied with the outcome of the negotiations. Now let's take a look at what transpired during the meetings.
For 2 days, the House of Representatives Committee on Health met with members of the National Association of Resident Doctors to resolve the problems which led to the ongoing strike by the association. NAT's nationwide indefinite strike, which started on August 2nd, is to press home the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding it entered into with the federal government in March 2021 on welfare and other issues that affect members, namely payment of COVID-19 inducement hazard allowance, domestication of Residency Training Act, as well as proper placement of doctors on the salary scale and regularization of the appointment of resident doctors. The strike by the resident doctors is crippling the country's health sector and continues despite the federal government's threat to invoke the No Work, No Pay provision in the Trade Disputes Act. On the first day of the meeting, the union accused the head of service, Ministry of Finance and the Budget Office of moving the payment system of the doctors to the Integrated Personnel Payroll Information System, IPPIS, for selfish reasons. But the Minister of State for Health dismissed the allegation that it withheld the backlog of the salary arrears of the doctors.
The enemy had made it expressly clear that Nigerian doctors reject casualization of the medical practice and medical doctors. Locum is not acceptable. You want to employ doctors, employ Nigerian doctors appropriately.
We in the Ministry of Health, we do not accede or agree to casualization, quote and unquote, of doctors in any guise.
At the end of the interaction, the House Committee on Health set up a subcommittee comprising the head of service of the Federation, Committee of the Chief Medical Doctors of Teaching Hospitals, and the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Special Duties, to find lasting solutions to the industrial action.
An issue of this nature.
The meeting continued the following day, and the chairman of the committee highlighted some of the issues of contention which needed to be addressed.
However, we have some issues that remain, and that issue is the commencement of payment.
Discussions moved to the non-payment of arrears for resident doctors. Midway into the meeting, the president of the association voiced his displeasure over some of the matters raised. However, the Minister of State for Health was offended by the words expressed by the president.
This matter has been brought down 3 times. I can assure you that this strike will not be called off if this matter is not treated.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I think I take exemption to the statement of the chairman or president of NAD. He should withdraw that statement.
I want to withdraw that statement and apologize.
The committee chairman highlighted some of the agreements reached so far and sought the buy-in of the association, but that is not forthcoming.
To be administered of us tomorrow, you have all the items we have discussed, where we are, so that you can have a documentation of what we have agreed. Is that okay?
It is not okay, obviously. No, I've said mine. I don't like postponing things. It is not okay. I will thank you for your time. Thank you, sir.
The meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you all.
NAD president spoke to Channels Television afterwards and explained the reason behind the stand of the leadership of the association.
Demands pertaining the welfare of our members, those who have lost. And as it stands, we are still having bottlenecks in every way. I'll give examples. Members on the platform of the gift mix That's still not been old 4 months. The decisions met in the meeting is that they have to investigate for the next 2 to 3 weeks what you have verified over 4 months ago. Meaning you still do not want to feel that they deserved to pay their salaries.
Following the stalemate in the intervention of the House of Representatives on the industrial action by NAD, negotiations will return to the Federal Ministries of Health and Labour. In the meantime, the strike continues with no end in sight.
On June 2nd, 2021, the Senate passed a bill to prohibit discrimination between first degrees and higher national diplomas. The bill is intended to end the discrimination faced by Polytechnic graduates in the labour market. We had an interview with the rector of the Federal College of Technology and Therapy, Enugu, Dr. John Emaimo, to discuss the implications of the passage of this bill.
As a stakeholder in the system, I feel it's a very good direction to go because the dichotomy has actually been creating a kind of a stress within the workforce and service delivery in the country. So I am thinking that this is something very novel, even though we've been having some issues of maybe information before that has been done. But over some time, we realized that it wasn't also executable given the structures of the government. We want to believe that this process of taking it to the National Assembly will put an end to it, and then will also allow the technological-based graduates from the Polytechnic to begin to take leads in certain areas that they are supposed to do, because it has been a kind of creating a bar, an unnecessary bar for that matter, for graduates of the Polytechnics who are supposed to drive the technological development of the country. So I so believe it is something that is going to bring in a new development that is going to be very positive to the manpower development as well as the service delivery in the country.
Now, before I take you on what you mean by taking a lead in the technological development, what has been the experience? Could you just share with us briefly the experiences of some of your students when they go out into the labor market, so to speak, and what they faced in terms of the dichotomy between these two degrees?
Yes, it has not been a very fun experience because a lot of them have come back to make reports of they are not being given equal opportunity with other colleagues from the university. The issue there really is that you don't notice that as a fresh graduate, because from the programs we run in the college, the fresh graduates resume work on level 8, and I think that is fairly the same thing with other graduates on similar programs. But on getting to level 10, 12, that is where the issue starts, because they are expected by law to stop at level 14, while the other colleagues will move on to level 17. It's even at that level where they're beginning to look at where to stop at level 14 that their skills and experiences are being quite sharpened in the field. And for them to realize that they will not be able to grow to level 17 like other counterparts, a kind of a psychological depression begins to set in. Some setback also comes in a way that they are not able to deliver their services as expected. And when they know that they are going to mark time, so to say, from that level till they become get to 60 years or 35 years, depending on the service where they find themselves, obviously the best of them cannot actually be achieved because they withdraw their productivity too and start scrambling for something else to open the windows for them. And I'm not sure that is a very good development. It's also helping the youths to grow as well. When they felt they've gone to school like others, since Polytechnic training is not less than 5 years in any program you are running, you do your 2 years ND and go for 1 year industrial attachment and come back to run for 2 years HND. Obviously, they spend enough time in the school to have equal opportunity. I'm so thinking that this is going to bring a very strong relief because it has been a burden on those graduates, if I can tell you the truth.
Now, some have blamed, have said that the polytechnics too and colleges of education appear to also be missing their way in terms of beginning to offer courses not technologically based. And this has huge consequences for what we're for the future of education and technology in the country. Do you agree?
Well, I wouldn't say that they've missed their way totally.
But they have missed their way a bit.
Because they have regulators, and I want to believe what is permissible by the regulator is actually the right thing to do. The polytechnics are actually being regulated by MBTE. So any course MBTE approved is actually approved for polytechnics. And also, if you take a look at it properly, you realize that technological-based education are not in isolation from the design-based education which the university actually also offered. There's a synergy, or there's a symbiotic relationship, or there is a need to put on the heat between technology and design. And that I so believe that if you have a course run in the Polytechnic and you also have a course run in the university, there's nothing wrong about that. But the issue there is going to be the approach of the courses. That of the Polytechnic is going to look at the technological perspective of it and how to also develop, how to also implement the designs that have been chunked out from the university system of education as well. So I don't see anything too bad, because the approach will be different. At the university level, the approach is about from the theoretical perspective, the design perspective. Take, for instance, the mass comm, which you are in, is run in the university. Mass comm is also in the Polytechnic. If you look at the course curriculum, I'm not sure they are quite similar. There's something different, there's something in between that creates the difference between the two levels of flow. And I think the both are actually necessary. And without both working together in the field, you don't have a whole system of mass communication effectively being delivered. So I'm not thinking that they are missing their way, but they're actually trying to also fill that technological gap that's existing from the other colleague from the other side. That is my view.
Speaking of technological gap, you did mention that there's going to be some sort of a refocus, that they will need to refocus in this regard. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what I actually mean is that, if, for instance, now we do not just train for service delivery, we don't train for production, we don't train for service or maintenance. That's the issue where we are actually trying to talk about missing the link, because in the country presently, everybody trained to design or to talk and walk away. Nobody's actually pinning down on taking what has been talked or what has been put on ground on the paper and develop that into what you can see practically. And nobody is also taking a focus on that aspect of the training that allow you to remain on the board of maintenance of fixing problems as it arises. By so doing, we are not having a holistic service delivery, maintenance, and then the utility of the labor too is not also complete. So I am thinking that the Polytechnic system that actually have been created for the purpose of the technological manpower development is the agency or the institution that is having that sole responsibility. But then if you do not have the ability to also rise to the peak of your career, it certainly means that you are missing the link. So that gap is what this National Assembly bill is will be correcting. Once that is put in place and every person knows that I am a technologist, I'm a scientist, you grow to the peak of your career by your left or right in any way you found yourself, and every person is also doing what they're supposed to do, we're going to see a new level of development.
Because some would say, the polytechnics are intended or are meant to fill the technological gaps, and we see what the world is going towards technology. The world has, new inventions, fintech is, coding and all this technologically backed, aspirations and all. Do you think there should be a change in a modification in the curriculum of polytechnics to meet these needs?
Obviously, the Polytechnic's curriculum is not outdated. The business is exactly what I said earlier. You have trained to produce, you have trained to manufacture, and suddenly somebody tells you that you stop here, you don't go further from here. For an HND student, you are supposed to be on a practical project in terms of production and things like that. But of course, they look at that as something not actually taking them anywhere. So some lecturers and some other colleagues in the field believe the fulfillment for them will be for them to write something that looks like thesis and then also deliver and come and speak grammar and do a defense and walk away and have the ego of a person who did the same thing. So that is one of the ways we are missing it. And it is not out of ordinary, it's just a case of people trying to emulate what they feel takes them to the height.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. We continue with the interview with the rector of the Federal College of Technology and Therapy, Enugu, Dr. John Emaimo, on the bill by the Senate to end discrimination between first degrees and higher national diplomas. Now, Section 1 of the bill provides that notwithstanding any legislation or policy, HND and first degree shall be deemed and treated as equivalent for the purpose of employment and career progression in public or private sectors. I'm talking about the enforceability of this. How do you think this can be enforced?
Honestly, it's enforceable because Nigeria is policy driven. What was enforced before was also from the policy. So if the policy also changed, the aspect of enforceability is not a challenge, if you ask me. Once the head of service send out a circular in respect of this, I think it is done.
But would this be binding on private companies, the private sector?
Yeah, the private sector, even as we speak, they actually enjoy more of the services of the Polytechnic graduates, because a lot of the private sector I know doesn't have that dichotomy. They've already have removed dichotomy from their own aspect of operation. Because if you look at the private sector, they look at your delivery, they see what you look at what you can do, what you bring to table. So in that case, the private sector is not going to look at the head of service rules to operate. It's more or less the issue of the public sector. If you take a look at it, you will agree with me that that is true. So the private sector wouldn't really have a problem. The problem with the private sector will have is you coming out with that your qualification and not being able to perform to their standard. They will have problem with you. But once you are able to know what you are doing and you are at home with your skills, the private sector rates you that way.
In the last edition of the Gavel, we did a breakdown of the mid-term scorecard of federal lawmakers in the Senate. A non-governmental organization focused on the National Assembly called the Order Paper Nigeria produced a mid-term report of the performance of senators in the last 2 years in terms of bills introduced and passed. Today, our attention is on federal lawmakers in the House of Representatives. We'll be examining the performance of Reps members in the last 2 years in terms of bills introduced and passed. Now, because of a number of members, we'll take some of them and continue in subsequent editions.
A legislative think tank and multi-platform interface called the Order Paper Nigeria recently released a series of midterm report cards of the National Assembly. According to the organization, these data-driven and carefully curated analysis of performances of the National Assembly and its members are benchmarked against the first 2 years of the 4-year tenure, that's from June 2019 to May 2021, of the current 9th Assembly, which was inaugurated on June 11, 2019. The report looks at the performance of members of the House of Representatives in terms of bills proposed and passed. The period being reviewed was from May 2019 to June 2021, and the data analyzed was primarily the NAS bills record. This report is examining the performance of members of the House of Representatives in 18 states, namely Abia, Anambra, Imo, Delta, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Plateau, Nasarawa, Kogi, Osun, Ondo, Ekiti, Borno, Bauchi, Gombe, Katsina, Jigawa, and Sokoto. An interesting trend that emerged was how well the new members to the House of Representatives performed in comparison to the returning long-time serving members. Although a returning member representative Tajuddin Abbas topped the Reps members' bill chart, the following new members put in notable effort to take spots on the chart. Honorable Benjamin Kalu, APC Abia, appeared on the 4th spot with 41 bills. Honorable Dachung Bagos, PDP Plateau, came in at the 7th spot with 30 bills, while Honorable Onofiok Akpan and Honorable Simon Mwadkwon, PDP Plateau, rounded up the chart at 9th and 10th respectively with 22 bills each. On the other hand, several of the returning long-time serving members on the list emerged from the states released thus far. They include Honorable Osai Nicholas Osai, PDP Delta, who took the 2nd spot with 44 bills. That is 47.8% of the total 92 bills sponsored by the Delta House of Representative members. Honorable Mohammed Tahir Munguno, APC Borno, the majority whip, came in on the 3rd spot. His 43 bills make up 82.7% of the total 52 bills sponsored by the Borno House of Representative members. Honorable Nkiruka Onyejocha, APC Abia, who is also the House Deputy Chief Whip, appeared on the 6th spot on the top 10 bill sponsorship chart with 30 bills. Notably, some new members led the bill's sponsorship within their respective states. For example, Honorable Benjamin Carlos' 41 bills accounted for 34.5% of the total of 119 bills sponsored by the Abia House of Representative members. Honorable Dachung Bagos with 30 bills. This is 28.8% of the total 104 bills sponsored by the Plateau House of Representative members. Honorable Onofiok Akpan, his 22 bills account for 36% of the total 61 bills sponsored by the Akwa Ibom House of Representative members. Honorable Manu Mansur, APC Bauchi, who leads the Bauchi contingent with 12 bills, accounts for 44.4% of the total of 27 bills sponsored by the Bauchi House of Representative members. Additionally, there was a not-too-young-to-run beneficiary who, although is not on the top 10 bill sponsorship list, made it to the top 10 new members list. The not-too-young-to-run law pegs the minimum age limit to run for House of Representative office at 25 years. The members considered here are those within the age bracket of 25 to 35 years, as at the time they assumed office. The beneficiary is Honorable Manu Mansur, APC Bauchi, 31 years old, and has sponsored 12 bills. He is 7th on the new members' bill sponsorship list.
We bring you the concluding part of the interview with the Executive Director, Order Paper Nigeria, Mr. Oke Epia, to discuss the reports on the performance of federal legislators prepared by his organization.
Well, we would like to see a situation where the National Assembly, especially the Senate, prioritizes the national interest. And make no mistake about it, the national interest is not the interest of the president. The national interest is not the interest of the presidency. The national interest is the interest of the generality of Nigerians. So if the generality of Nigerians speak loud and clear in favor, for instance, of electronic transmission of results, why do you go against the national interest to indicate that that's not what Nigerians want? And then you pass the legislation contrary to what Nigerians want. It is a minus. It is antithetical to the practice of democracy. They will tell you that we had the numbers, but then, is it a national imperative at this point in time? So the point I make in referring to this example is that coming back from their annual recess, can we see more work towards progressing this country, respect to the conduct of elections and the deepening of democracy? Deepening of democracy means that they should keep away from all of these attempts and shenanigans to constrict the civic space in cahoots with certain elements in the executive. We should not see all of this kind of bills. Good thing in the House of Representatives, the bill on the media gag bill that has been stoutly resisted, not just by the media, but Nigerians generally, has been withdrawn. Okay, so we like to see such steps and, a concentration on expanding the civic space, expanding democratic practice, and allowing the voice of Nigerians to flourish and to be heard. That's on one front. On the other front, what are those bills relating to the economy, relating to management of the public finance system that we want to see get attention, priority attention from the National Assembly when they resume? There are a couple of them. Good thing, and they like to trumpet. It's fine that we've been able to return to the January to December budget cycle. But we will soon find out the value that has brought to the public finance system. That's another conversation. But it's a great thing that they have done that. It's also great that they quickly pass, the Fiscal Responsibility Act Amendment Bill. That is one critical piece of legislation that would greatly impact positively on the public finance management system of this country. They should also quickly give attention to the audit bill. That's one legislation that has lagged around for so long. And that is why you see, the ritual, and I use that word advisedly, that the committees on public accounts in the Senate and the House of Representatives undertake year in, year out. It appears that they just call out, defaulting MDAs, and then it ends at that. Because that law is defaultive. There's a default in that law. It needs to be amended. Why is it not an imperative?
This is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.
The